All right, welcome folks who are joining. Just a reminder that during the interview portion, if you can keep your camera off and your microphone muted, and then
somebody's speaking, but I don't hear anything.
Looks like there are a lot of people there.
yeah. All right, so microphones muted and cameras off for this portion, and then when we get to the Q&A portion at the end, I will call on folks for questions, and we will get going here. All right, so I am Katie with the Babe Ruth Museum, and it is our honor to host Nicole Sherry tonight with Roch Kubatko, and tonight's session is being sponsored by Fran Soisman, so thank you, Fran, for sponsoring this. And we are honored to co-host tonight with the Maryland Women's Heritage Center, and Kathy Santora, who is their president, is going to give us a couple words about their organization. So go ahead, Kathy.
Good evening. It's so good to see so many people here. Our board of directors and our volunteers recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of Maryland's women, both past and present. In everything that we do, we add her story to history to tell our story. We have an exhibit space at the former Women's Industrial Exchange at 333 North Charles Street. However, our programs are both in-person and virtual, and they cover women from all over Maryland. We're really happy to partner with the Babe Ruth Museum and to bring a spotlight on to Nicole Sherry, yet another fascinating Maryland woman. Thank you.
All right, so Roch, who is our MC tonight, he started covering sports for the Baltimore Sun in 1986, and in his 22 years with the Sun, he's covered every major sporting event, NBA, NFL, MLB, lacrosse, and he's established himself as one of the top sports writers in our region. He is an Annapolis native and University of Maryland graduate who started blogging in 2005, which led him to a full-time position blogging with MASN in 2008, and you might know his popular School of Rock blog, which offers daily insight into our Baltimore Orioles. And in addition, Roch makes several appearances on MASN's Oriole broadcasts and on 105.7 The Fan. So from here, I'm going to hand it off to Roch, who will talk with Nicole.
I'll do some MLB network stuff, but enough about me. Nicole, I first of all, it's really nice to talk to you here. And I did jump on the internet, which I still think is a fad, but I went on the internet to do a little research on you because I don't know what's accurate, what isn't. And I immediately saw that you are either from Newcastle, Delaware, or Wilmington, and you either went to Delaware Tech or the University of Delaware. So let's clear this up right now. Where are you from and where did you go to college?
Okay, so I am from Newcastle, Delaware, and it's just 2 miles outside of Wilmington, Delaware. So more people know Wilmington than Newcastle. So I have mentioned that I'm from Wilmington in the past. I did go to Delaware Tech Community College for a 2-year degree in applied agricultural technologies. And that's how really it led me to Camden Yards, and I can get into that later. But I did graduate with my bachelor's of science. I'm muted. I do have 2 degrees, so I'm pretty fancy. I can't hear you, Roch.
Muted. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you.
You had been at your current position, head groundskeeper, since 2006. And I know you were an assistant for a few years, and you went to the AA Trenton Thunder, which is a good nickname for groundskeeping, and then came back. What was that moment in your life, maybe as a young girl, I don't know, where you said, you know what, this is what I want to do, and I want it to be on a baseball field? Was there a particular moment you remember?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to study plants. Like, I was just fascinated from a teenager all through my first part of my early years of college. Wanted to know what plants needed to survive and so many different environmental issues that come forth with them. But but it was at my time at Delaware Tech where we had an irrigation class. So we learned everything hands-on, and we took a field trip to Camden Yards to see their state-of-the-art irrigation system, because in 1992, when Camden Yards was first built, it had everything that you could imagine for a newer ballpark. And the irrigation system at the time was able to like vacuum off water if it was to ever flood or, you know, overwater or whatever you want to say, would be able to like pretty much vacuum off any of this water on the field. So we took a field trip there. I grabbed the head groundskeeper's business card, and then I went to work on a golf course for a few years. And then I called him and I was like, hey, I took a tour. We saw the irrigation system. I was wondering if I could maybe get an internship. And then he said, well, could you be here in 2 weeks? And I ended up starting, my first day on the job was July 16, 2001. And that ended up being Cal Ripken's last year as an Oriole. So I got to see pretty much everything as far as like Camden Yards is concerned, but also witness history. So it was pretty amazing.
Did you have a lot of people encouraging you to pursue this, or did you have anybody along the way say, hey, women don't do that?
No, everybody was like a groundskeeper in baseball, like because the job isn't really known, you know, like nobody looks at, you know, what we do every single day and thinks about it as being a science-driven career, first of all, but also a career that pays a decent salary or, you know, a long-term type career. So people were, you know, encouraging, you know, happy that I was getting a chance to work at Camden Yards, but also wondering like, what the heck is she doing? You know, like you're getting your degree in agriculture, but yet you want to study groundskeeping or more specific turfgrass science.
What previous jobs did you have outside of baseball? I mean, did you work at McDonald's? Were you yeah, that were you making your money?
Well, you know, growing up, you know, being 15, I worked at the Tasty Freeze, which is an ice cream shop. I worked at Boston Chicken, which that's what it was called at the time. Now it's referred to as Boston Market, if anybody is familiar with that. JC Penney's, I sold shoes. And like where I'm from in Delaware, it's a very like heavy Catholic school area. So like selling shoes, I was making 9% commission. So I was really rolling in it as a teenager. And then I studied turfgrass. I worked on a golf course. I worked at the University of Delaware Research and Education Center. I did like a lot of trial tests for herbicides that weren't on the market at that time. That's what, you know, universities do, test herbicides and fungicides and such. But I got a lot of experience in the farm fields, and then it led me eventually to working on the golf course and then in Major League Baseball.
If this groundskeeper thing doesn't work out, you can always go back to shoes.
Exactly.
Not that, okay.
Exactly. Yeah,
Now,
I was considered a footwear specialist. So if anybody needs any advice on shoes.
That's the other degree, okay?
Yep, I got you covered for sure.
Only the second female head groundskeeper ever. Now, do you bond with Detroit's, and I want to make sure I'm not butchering her last name, Heather DeBosny?
Nabosny, yep.
DeBosny, who's been there since 1999. Do you develop a friendship?
No, well, so like getting into, you know, this role as an intern, first of all, and then an assistant, I didn't realize that there weren't really any women that did this work, you know, because in my schooling, we had a ton of women in all my classes. I mean, you're talking about poultry, dairy farm, you know, just farming in general. There were a lot of women. Horticulture, I have a minor in horticulture, which is the study of flowers. But so I didn't realize that there weren't any women in the field. And then when my boss at the time, Al Capitas, he said, yeah, there's only one woman that has a head groundskeeper role in Major League Baseball, and that's Heather Nabosny. I did say to myself internally, like, well, I'm going to be the second, you know, and it was just weird how it all kind of panned out. But when I did get hired as the head groundskeeper for the Baltimore Orioles, Heather called, and she said, I knew there was going to be another woman in this industry, and I'm really glad that it's you. And I was like floored, because like, you know, she was the matriarch, of,
Right.
women in this industry. And it's really fascinating. But, there are only 30 jobs. So it's really hard to get a position in Major League Baseball, and then also to, just get the head groundskeeper role as a female is going to be really tough for future women coming up. Not because women can't do this job, but just because there's only 30 jobs in the whole world. So you have to put that in a little bit of perspective. But what's that?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, she was really encouraging, and I talked to her not as often as I would like, but they host a vast amount of events. And then when Oriole Park started hosting more events than just baseball, I did reach out to her more than anybody else as my colleagues.
Can you name all 30 head groundskeepers in baseball? I'll time you right now.
I can, but it would take way more than the time is allotted.
I'm impressed that you can, though. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure I got this right now. You're the first woman who was named Professional Facilities Director for the National Sports Turf Manager Association Board of Directors. Tell us more about that.
So we have a national association, and that consists of any groundskeeper that takes care of fields from K through 12, professional, college, collegiate fields, D1 through D3, 4, whatever you want to associate that with, park and rec, Major League Baseball, NFL, Major League Soccer, lacrosse, anything field related we have this national association. And for the first time, and I think it was 2019, 2020 was the first time a female, myself, sat on the board of directors for a professional facility. Prior to that, I can't think of his last name, but Alan, he's the Green Bay Packers head groundskeeper. He was on the board, and multiple men before that.
I know a lot of people wonder, and I certainly do, what is a typical day like for you? And I feel like it's in 3 parts. When the team is home, when the team's on the road, and certainly in the off season, when I think a lot of us just assume that the field hibernates like a groundhog and suddenly wakes up in the spring and there's baseball again.
Right. A lot of people think that my job is not year round, and that when the team is away, we have a decent break. But I'll start with when the team is at home, it's more about getting the field ready for the game that evening or that afternoon. So it consists of getting the grass cut in 2 different directions, getting the dirt ready for the field of play, any rain situations that occur the night before or day of, batting practice for both teams, which surprisingly, a lot of people think that the players just show up and are ready to play the game, but they're there from 11 a.m. on, getting ready, doing their work to get, ready for that evening's game. So we're constantly trying to get that field ready for them to accept the play, to accept any batting practices that occur. And then we work for about an hour and a half after every game, getting the field back into regular playing surface time, or regular playing surface consistency, because you never know what's going to happen overnight. There might be a thunderstorm that pops up out of nowhere that we're not prepared for. So when we leave that field each night after a game, it's ready to play on no matter what occurs. And then when the team is away, we do have other events that take place on the field. We have college baseball, we have high school all-star games, we have corporate sales events where people come and hit batting practice. So we have to kind of balance our agronomic schedule around that. And then when there is a good break on the field where we can actually get out there and repair any damage that was made by the athletes that play on the surface, aerate consistently. We're always poking holes into the ground, making sure the plant has enough oxygen. We're spraying chemicals every 2 weeks. We are foliar feeding fertilizer every week, every 7 days. So it's something's always going on the field, and we're maintaining it every single day. We're cutting the grass in 2 different directions every day during the growing season, through the summer and into the fall. And then the third part is the off season. So our off season in Maryland, as everybody knows, we haven't had a winter and, you know, a real winter, right? So there's really not a lot of downtime for what groundskeepers do. So we're maintaining that field through December. We have projects. Last year, we put a brand new field in. So that took until December 19th to complete. I take a lot of vacation in January just to get a break from the field. And then we move inside when we can't be out on the field, repairing any equipment that we have, sending that out for service if we can't fix it internally, ordering new supplies for the following year, and hiring a brand new crew. Like I have 30 people on my staff, 2 of which are full-time year-round like myself, but everybody else is seasonal. So it depends on if they find another job in the industry or if they find something else that they want to do. We typically have a high turnover rate of staff. So it's a lot of hiring.
That's a great segue, because I was going to ask you about the turnover, because I mean, to me, it's like you're the best, your crew's the best every year. And I'm like, but they're not the same people every single year. So I'm assuming it's heavy turnover and you've got to retrain a whole new group.
It's a lot of training. And, you know, the turfgrass industry as a whole really has diminished. So in the past, when I was first coming up, there were a lot of people studying turfgrass science. They would either go towards golf course superintendent route, you know, taking jobs at golf courses, or study something within the sports turf industry, which is like Major League Soccer, baseball, football, you name it, anything that's, you know, a higher status than just like, you know, park and rec grounds, which is no different from what I do. But I'm just saying, like they gear towards golf course industry more than sports turf. So that as a whole, in all the land grant universities like University of Maryland, University of Delaware, Penn State University, any of these land grant universities have a turfgrass or agronomy type major where kids can go in and study that. Since that has diminished, or most of those students are going towards golf course industry because there's more jobs, right? I just mentioned that there's only 30 jobs in Major League Baseball. Think about how many there are in football. Not many. So a lot of kids like studying turfgrass science would gear towards golf course industry. Now, we've had a lot of kids that have graduated with turfgrass degrees that have worked under me and that have gone on to do some really great things. But now, as we get more and more into, you know, technology and students really wanting to pursue other avenues, that has diminished, like I mentioned. But you're now getting people that are like, oh, I didn't realize that there was a career, or this could be a career in the future. So I'm trying to take those individuals and train them up to maybe pursue a certificate or something in the future that will, you know, aid them in getting a degree in turf or, you know, the like. But the tarp crew that we have, so the kids that you see rolling out the tarp during rain delays are just high school and college kids, and they turn over like you wouldn't believe, because some of them are like, I'm not doing this, and some of them are like, just what a great summer job, but you wouldn't believe how much they complain too about having that kind of summer job. But yeah, it's a lot of practice prior to the season starting, telling them the realness of like what's going to happen. Like, you're going to work long hours, it's going to be outside, you're going to get wet all the time. It rains, well, not this year, but like in the past, I mean, we have rain every other day, like Florida. So it's just a crapshoot, really, honestly, what you get. But they're great kids, you know, and they really are like those individuals that want to work in a team atmosphere. And that's what I think showcases more than anything else when we're out there doing our jobs.
I've had people suggest, hey, it'd be a great story idea if you join the crew for like a day or
Do
whatever. And you know what? I always say, well, it looks too hard. No, but I would think the tarp thing that part would be the worst. Because I was in DC a few seasons ago, and I felt bad for them when the wind kicked up so heavy and they could not get that tarp on the field. It was like a disaster. I would think you probably have nightmares of that.
I do have nightmares
when you wake up thinking about it.
You wouldn't believe how many nightmares. So a lot of, maybe everybody on the call understands that, like, when I run out, like I finally in the last like maybe decade, you were allowed to bring out a radar to show the umpire, because you had to, I'll get on a big tangent here, but in the past, I would have to go and greet the umpire crew at 6 o'clock because they didn't show up anytime before that, and tell them what the weather was expected for that evening. And so I said, well, if there's anything brewing, I'll come out and on the field, wherever your position is. We're only allowed to talk to the crew chief. And that's the only person that I can have communication with. Can't talk to anybody else but the crew chief. So I go to the crew chief, and in the past, I used to have to convey, hey, there's a storm coming, and they wouldn't believe you. So it would be like, you had to really build a great rapport with them prior to the game or before that series, because they're going to be there for that whole series, and have them gain your trust, because there had been a lot of groundskeepers in the past that would manipulate that kind of confrontation. They would say, oh, it's going to rain, and they get them to pull the tarp, and then no rain happens, and then it burns the other other team starter. So there was a lot of like gamesmanship going on with that. So it took a while to build trust in these umpire crew chiefs, that you were there for a real reason, telling them that some kind of bad situation is going to happen on the field. Well, within the last decade, you were allowed to bring out your iPhone or an iPad and show them the actual radar, which in the past you had to tell it by, it's a lot. And then one umpire crew chief in particular was Joe West. He didn't believe anything that you were saying, even if you were showing him the iPad like in his face. I mean, there was a time when we had tornadoes in Fells Point. Like there were tornado clouds like starting to form in Fells Point. And he didn't believe me. If you Google any kind of images of Joe West in baseball, I might be in some of those, like just soaking wet, showing him an iPad saying, Joe, this is not gonna be good for the rest of the evening. And the only reason he pulled the tarp was because Nick Markakis slid in the second and ended up in the shortstop position area. And it's like, what do you do? Like these people, I'm not trying to pull your leg or anything. I just need to get the tarp on the field so we don't have to do a lot of work, because it is a lot of work to run 50-pound bags and drying agent out onto the field, dry it up, and then have it safe for those athletes who are multi-million-dollar athletes, plus being able to play a 9-inning game. So it's a lot that goes into it.
Well, we're watching from the press box. Anytime we see you come up between innings, we're like, uh-oh, Nicole's on the field. She's got her iPad. She's talking to the crew chief. We're screwed because of rain delays, like our worst nightmare. Even though you're doing all the work, we whine from the dry press box, like, oh no, Nicole's on the field.
Well, it's the worst too. It's the worst too, because you only have a minute, 80 seconds to convey something to an umpire and then run all the way back in. I mean, it's a long run out, long run in, and then to decipher everything that's going on with the radar in that amount of time is just really difficult. The last time I ran out there, this last homestand, we had a little bit of a showery type situation pop up that we avoided, but the umpire crew chief said that he was colorblind. So what I was showing him, the different rain on a radar, normal radar, you can see different color indications that represent light rain to moderate to heavy rainfall. And he was like, just pretend I'm colorblind. Like, what am I looking at here? And I was like, oh man, I didn't even think about that, because it was just crazy. So I was like, we're going to be okay. It might rain, but we'll be fine. And then I ran back in, trying to get through the 9th inning.
Well, I've learned two things in my years. When a ball's hit, watch the outfield or don't watch the ball. And if the grounds crew's not lined up behind the tarp, it's not a big deal. Those are your two things. Oh, I implore fans, please watch the outfielder. Don't overreact every fly ball. Watch the grounds crew.
Exactly.
Buck used to always say, hey, it's weather's unpredictable because when the wind comes off the Chesapeake, whatever. Is that one of the bigger challenges? Because the forecast can change in an instant. It can look terrible, and then all of a sudden there's a shift and we don't get hit at all. And people are wondering, or the vice versa, and people wonder, why is the tarp going on the field? It isn't even raining yet.
Right. Well, a lot of it has to do with the tarp itself. The tarp is 2,000 pounds dry, stationary on the field. So you can imagine if we maybe pulled out that tarp earlier in the day and pulled it off in time for the game to get played, and then we had rain reappear later that evening, that tarp is like really saturated and wet and heavy. So my job is really to convey to that umpire crew chief that, listen, we had rain earlier in the day, the tarp is heavy, it's wet, I'm gonna need a lot of time. Or they're calling for 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts with this tarp. The tarp itself is 170 feet by 170 feet square. So pulling, like, you're almost pulling like a sail out over the field, and like, you know, safety of these people that are helping you pull the tarp is number one. And just getting it on and safe enough where it's covering the infield dirt and the kids are protected. I say kids because they're all, you know, younger than I am, but like, you know, these individuals are pulling the tarp. You want to make sure their safety is at top priority and the safety for the fans. But it's really hard to convey that to somebody that, you know, wants to try to get that game in, and every second counts and pitching counts, and like, it's just, it's a lot going on at the same time. And sometimes storms will be approaching the ballpark from the west, so the third base side, and then go completely around us and really dump on the east side of us. And sometimes it hits us, you know, full on with hail, with winds. So it's a lot. And, you know, I get really slammed a lot about like the decisions we have to make for the game. But really, it's to protect the athletes, protect the infield surface so they can play the game if we can get it going. Because, you know, if we lose a game due to a bad call with not pulling the tarp on or not being prepared enough, I mean, think about the revenue, think about the TV, think about everything else that goes on, and the athletes themselves, their pitching rotation, everything could get messed up if you have to delay the game or play a doubleheader the next day.
Now, in the minors, pretty much everybody helps with the tarp, right? I've talked to broadcasters that say, oh yeah, I got to go now. I got to go help with the tarp. Like pretty much everybody who's employed by that team is pulling the tarp.
Right. Well, here, that's why we have that, you know, that 30-person tarp crew to come in and wait and just watch a game and bait. Well, they have other job duties, but like their sole purpose is to pull that tarp.
You mentioned the new field, the new sod. I was just happened to be in the warehouse on the 5th floor, the massive web studio, one random day, and I looked out the window and it looked like a beach. It was just sand. And I'm like, it's like being in Siesta Key. I had no idea. And I came back, I swear, for like a couple of days later, and it was done. I was amazed by how quickly. What was the purpose, first of all, of having that done? Was this just an upgrade? Is there kind of a certain amount of years that you replace it? And what was that whole process like for you?
Yeah, so it started in 2020 during the COVID season. I was like, you know, our field has pretty much reached its peak of, you know, performance. And it wasn't the grass. The grass has always looked great. Everybody can't, you know, you can't really wrap their heads around like, well, why'd you replace the grass? It looked fine. Well, it looks great on the surface, but underneath the surface is where it was starting to fail. We were starting to get a lot of disease pressure. We were starting to get failing roots. And that was from the buildup of a lot of organic matter. And with all the rain that we've received in the past, like it was starting to compromise the drainage. Currently, right now, with our field being brand new, we can drain 44 inches of rain within an hour. So that, put that in perspective. In the past, it was 16 inches of rain within an hour. But during the season, bluegrass, which is what we have on the field, it's 100% Kentucky bluegrass, it will start cutting off its root system to survive those really hot, humid summer days. Like it's a fascinating plant if you really want to dive into what grass can do. But so the grass grows about 12 inches, like the roots grow about 12 inches into the sand. And every year during the summer months when it's really hot and we don't want to be outside in it, the bluegrass will start cutting off its own root system shorter and shorter to survive those like quick downpours, those quick thunderstorms. And then what happens to all that root matter that they cut off? It starts building up organic matter, which starts to really compromise the soil and slow drainage. So that was the reason for the overhaul this past off season. So we dug out about 5 inches of sand and put all new root zone in, which is 100% pure sand. So now can drain really great. But also the genetics of the turf grass have changed so much. There are like genetically modified grasses that can withstand heat, that can withstand drought, that can withstand certain diseases that really affect bluegrass. So this is like the latest and greatest grass that any research and scientific manipulation has occurred on our field. And that was the main motivation behind it.
And the whole thing took how long from start to finish?
So the whole process took about 4 weeks. It was 1,500 tons of sand that was brought in and removed, and the sod was laid within 3 days. So they had been growing the sod on the sod farm. In the past, had taken trips to the sod farm to make sure like our plot of land, which is almost about 2 acres, was maintained right, that looked healthy, did some testing on that. And then it was brought in probably a week before Christmas and laid, and then it was our job to like really get it growing and moving in the right direction for this season.
Now, did you have involvement in the change of the left field dimensions, being moved back? How did that impact the field?
So early in I think 2021, was it? Yeah, early in 2021, Sig Meidel, who is our assistant general manager in analytics, he came to me and he was like, what are your thoughts about moving home plate back about 7 feet? I was like, don't even do it, because in 2001, we did that for, some kind of, I don't know what it was. In the year 2000, they moved home plate back 7 feet. But what they didn't realize is that they had to move the foul poles. So everything had to move. And you don't really think about that when you're just, thinking about moving home plate back, but everything has to shift a little bit. And that really impacted the viewpoint of a lot of our season ticket holders. Everything had to kind of shift. So it was a weird angle for a lot of people, and it didn't really help. And I said, please don't do that. Just try to like move the outfield wall if you can, because that would just be easier for everybody. And not that he took that advice. I mean, Sig Meidel is a very smart analytic man, but they ended up thinking about it and finding out like what it would entail. And that would be the easiest thing to do to accomplish what we were going for. And that was to eliminate a lot of home runs in that area. So we were talking about it for almost a year. And then when they made the call, I got a phone call the night before the construction happened and said, hey, we're going to like blow up this wall tomorrow. And I'm like, excuse me, it's January 16th. Like we're going to blow up a wall. If it makes sense to everybody on the call, but where there were seats in the outfield was moved back probably like 13 rows or 13 or 12 rows.
Yeah.
We didn't know what was underneath because the blueprints had been lost for a long time. There are no blueprints about where the outfield wall was. And there's been so much slack in the media about like that, like pesky outfield corner where it's just that really hard 90. That ended up being a footer for the stadium. So like you couldn't take that out, but we didn't have any blueprints to go back and really look at that. And MLB had to approve any changes as well, and that slowed up the process. But where there was seats now had to be all sand underneath, new irrigation, new drainage, and the warning track had to be removed, and then add new warning track and drainage for that, which is 2 different components. And then the removal of the outfield or install of the outfield wall was just, it was a lot of work in 3 months time to complete for sure. But yes.
And the pitchers love it and the hitters hate it. So.
Yes, but it really did eliminate a lot of home runs, and it did for our team as well. And I understand that, but like, I mean, if you could see the stats on where they did a lot of analytics on like showing where a lot of the home runs had been fallen in the ballpark. I mean, probably close to like 70% of the home runs went in that area. So imagine how many that saved for us as well.
Right.
And hopefully
now,
we entice more pitchers.
That was a big selling point. That was a big reason for it. Free agent pitchers. Yep.
For sure.
Is it just our imagination? Does the warning track, is it the exact same color as the warehouse?
Yes. and it's really quirky, and that's why I have a love-hate relationship with Camden Yards, because everything has to kind of like match the warehouse. We hand blend 3 different colors of infield dirt to match our warehouse, and it's beautiful. I mean, it brings your eye right up, but excuse me, the brick that is on the warning track, it's crushed brick, but it's the newer brick that's used to repoint the brick of the warehouse. So obviously the warehouse is over 150 years old. The brick that we use now to repoint any bricks that may have shifted or whatever work goes into that masonry like type of work, that kind of brick is shipped to a certain place, it's crushed, and it's delivered to us, and we are the only ones that have that color brick.
And it used to be a synthetic track.
It used to be a rubber track.
Right
Before Buck got there.
Yes, and he hated the rubber track.
He hated it. I loved it. He hated it. I think that's where we clashed the most. But I understand that we had a rubberized warning track, and for the people on this call, it's almost like you would go to a high school running track for track and field. That's the kind of surface that we had as our warning track, and like the players didn't want to dive on it, to catch any balls. Number one, our outfield dimensions are very small. So, and the warning track's very short, like it's only about 20 feet wide. So would they really dive on it anyway? I doubt it. But the thought was, in a game situation, if they needed to dive, they're not going to choose to dive. So we decided to rip it out. It was all asphalt underneath, and install that new crushed brick, which I'm still mad at Buck a little bit, as groundskeeper for that, but I understand now.
Right. Well, every ball that hit it bounced over the fence. I think that was one of the things he hated about it. It was like always automatic doubles if it bounced.
Yes. A lot of ground rule doubles did occur during that warning track's tenure, for sure.
Right. Now they're bringing a lot of concerts now to the ballpark. And again, one of my first thoughts is always, oh, Nicole might hate this. I don't know.
Yeah.
On your field.
Oh my gosh. So our first major concert was Billy Joel. And that was really nerve-wracking, because as a head groundskeeper, like, your job is to make sure that field is safe and playable for all the athletes. And who knows what's going to go wrong. You're bringing in this like ginormous steel stage that's going to be set on grass that is the underneath is sand. So like, for me to comprehend how that works and how that's going to be okay when it's removed off the field was a little bit intimidating. And then not to mention the flooring that goes over the field to allow a lot of fans in to like stand there and sit and enjoy the concert. It's about a 4-day prep for these concerts, and they give you maybe about anywhere from 24 to 72 hours to get the field back in shape before a game is played on the field. And our first time doing it, I think we threw everything we could at it, like, just to protect it, and it ended up being okay. There was some damage, but we masked it pretty good. And then last year we had Paul McCartney showcase at our field, and that was really incredible to witness, but also same like kind of fears. Like, you don't even want to know like what I dream about in the middle of the night. Like it's just insane. But there's so many people that host more events than we do, that I am able to contact those people and say, like, how did you get out of this? What did you do prior to, during, and right after that made your field safe enough for these athletes that play here? Because we do really focus on the athlete safety, number one, more than aesthetics.
Which band would you want to see there if they have to have concerts anyway? Who's your favorite band? I'm on record saying I want Pearl Jam in Baltimore.
Yes. Yeah, Pearl Jam would be number one. Foo Fighters, somebody more.
Yes.
Like, just, awesome to see. I mean, I'm not dismaying Bruce Springsteen, who's coming at September 9th, or Paul McCartney, which was just like, a legend, right? Like, you have to see him, and he was 80 years old rocking it, out there. And then Billy Joel, growing up in northern Delaware, I'm over Billy Joel, but it's fine. Just somebody a little bit more like that I would enjoy seeing, and it would be worth it for me.
I remember once we talked about the attempt to grow ivy
Yes.
that area, and I think I said something like, because you'd mentioned about the different kinds of ivy, and I said, oh, I thought there was just one kind of ivy, and you're like, Roch, is there one kind of tree? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I am an idiot, actually. That's a good point.
No, I did.
Why
I
did
did
that?
not
No, but
mean
why
to
did that
insult
not
you.
work? No, but it's true. I hadn't thought of that. But why didn't that work?
So the ivy wall, and if anybody can kind of like take a step back, it has a lot of history, right? Camden Yards is built after the 5 historic ballparks: Wrigley Field, Fenway, Ebbets Field, Forbes Field, and there's Shibe Park. So those 5 ballparks are incorporated in our Camden Yards, and I can get into like what other facets are there. But the ivy was a big deal because you have this batter's eye, right? And the batter's eye has to be a solid color throughout the entire playing season. So March through the end of October into November. And they tried to grow ivy on top of that wall because, as you see now, it's just this like ugly green wall. But the ivy could only get up to a certain point before it started really deteriorating and showing it was more leggy than anything. And when I say leggy, it was showing more bark than it was leaf.
Right.
Because it was striving to find something like cool weather or cool shaded areas, which ivy tends to grow very predominantly in those areas.
Yeah.
Well, that batter's eye, that green wall that we all witness every single night, is 190 degrees during the day.
Oh.
190 degrees. So
Wow.
could you imagine being a plant growing in that kind of atmosphere? It's just not conducive for it. So the ivy developed a root rot disease called Phytophthora. I had to get all these ivy specialists in. They all suggested all these different ivies, some that would like change color and it would be beautiful, and some that would flower. And I'm like, no, we can't have any color change or color variation because that's going to throw off where the pitcher releases the ball. They need to have a solid background. So that's why we haven't tried to establish any more ivy, because the only ivy that can do it was the English ivy that we tried, and it just does not do well in 190 degrees off that concrete wall. So sorry, everybody.
Who's in charge of the tomato plants and how did that come about? Because that's going back to the Earl Weaver days at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, so last year we had our 30th anniversary. Was it last year?
Mhm.
It was last year, correct?
They all run
last
together.
year.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know they do all run together. But so one of my Tarp crew captains, Rob Doach, has been on the crew since he was 19. He is now 49 years old. And so he's been around for a long time. And he was like, you know, for the 30th anniversary, can we bring in the ivy, or God, now you got me thinking about ivy, the tomato plants, and try to grow them this year? And I was like, yeah, why not? You know, 30th anniversary, a throwback to Memorial Stadium. Pat Santarone, who is the head groundskeeper at Memorial Stadium, grew beefsteak tomatoes, and Earl Weaver, I believe, grew heirloom tomatoes, or I might have them, you know, mixed matched. But they had this competition every year. So we decided last year to try to grow these tomato plants, and they did well. Some of them were great, but I found out that tomatoes really love sandy, dry soils. So if anybody on here is tomato connoisseur, please share any details and little tips and tricks, because we are trying to grow them up again. They've been planted, but now they're not where the pitchers are, because they did not like that. They did not like our pitching staff at the home bullpen, which is the lower bullpen, did not like the tomato plants just because they were too big and squirrely. So it closed in the space for them, apparently. So we moved them in the back near the ivy wall in the corner.
We've had some pitchers who are big and squirrely, but I digress. Speaking of which, let's talk, who are some of the players that have been like the neediest when it comes to going to you saying, hey, I need the field to be like this, and somebody else says, I need the grass taller, I need it shorter, I need whatever. Like
a lot of them. Number one, Buck Showalter was very needy about what he wanted with the field, and sometimes you had to, Buck was like, you know, you just had to say, Buck, you know, it's a great idea, but it's not going to work. Right. Second, the two prominent ones that I can think of are Jeremy Guthrie. Do you all remember him? Jeremy Guthrie was a pitcher on our staff for a long time. He was very picky about the field. And Sidney Ponson, do you remember that guy?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Sidney Ponson. If he, like, you know, the starting rotation is what it is, but it can shift at any minute. You know, like one time you're going to be the starter on the 5th day, the next day, I don't know how it all works, but like he did not want any water whatsoever on the infield, on the pitcher's mound. Sidney Ponson, when he pitched, it couldn't have even a drop of water. You couldn't even put like darker colored dirt on the mound or he would freak out. Like he would say, this is too wet, I can't pitch. I'm like, Sidney, it's like concrete, like it's dust pretty much when you're pitching. So he was very picky about it. Jeremy Guthrie didn't like that either. He only liked the back and the sides wet and the front had to be completely dry. And he also had to eat a hamburger at like Pickles Pub before the game. Like, so he was really all in his own head about that stuff. Brian Roberts was pretty picky about like how he liked his second base position area and the running path from first base to second base. Who else? Gosh, there's so many that have come and gone that just needed a lot of care. And that's why as a groundskeeper, you don't go to those players and say, hey, how was the field last night? Because then everything will be about the field. It's not about like maybe a mistake they had, or maybe it was just a crappy game. So I try to refrain from approaching any coach or athlete about how the field was played. They will come to you and tell you what they want for sure. And those few that I mentioned are the culprits.
What's the biggest enemy of the grass? Nick Markakis's sunflower seed shells or Adam Jones's bubble gum?
The sunflower seeds. The sunflower seeds, you know, it's a great commodity. A lot of people, they have to stay busy. You know, it's a lot of like nervous energy chewing these seeds. But the sunflower seeds, what a lot of people don't realize is the salt content. So all the salt from the seed, even though like, you know, they're eating the seed, a lot of them just kind of like shake the bag out, I think, just to, you know, make me upset. But they, you know, that does deposit a lot of salt content into that square footage of plant, and that plant cannot take up that salt and be healthy. It will really deteriorate, dry out. So that's the biggest thing. Adam Jones was bad about the gum. He would chew 3 chews and then shoot out like a piece of gum, or every time he made a catch in the outfield would spit out that gum. Like, so his area was always littered with sunflower seeds and bubble gum, and Nick Markakis was probably the worst with the sunflower seeds.
Do you have to train your crew on how to handle snow? Because there's at least one time when it did snow.
It did snow. My first year as an assistant, I was hired on, and we were in the drag tunnel, and that's the tunnel behind home plate there. We come out every 3rd and 6th inning to drag the field. We were in a snow delay. For some reason, I mean, it was cold that day. I think it was opening day. I'm not sure if it was opening day or not, but it was one of the opening weeks. And all of a sudden we had this snow squall go through, and nobody knew what to do because it hadn't snowed before on opening day. In other, you know, cities that have baseball, it probably snows a lot, but for us, it never snowed on opening day. So, and it was coming down. And we're like, what do we do? Do we tarp? Do we not tarp? So nobody knew what to do. It ended up being like a 30-minute delay. But no, we didn't tarp the field or anything, because like, could you imagine tarping, putting the tarp on and then snow falling on top of it? How would we get it off?
Right.
We'd have to, it would take forever to shovel it off. I don't know what they, but the head groundskeeper at the time decided not to tarp it and just sit out that snow squall. But that was one of the most like oddest moments I think I've ever had on that field.
When you talk about favorite moments, the one thing that always stands out to me, the infamous clinch miss, right? 2014, clinched the division title at home, the massive celebration, and Adam Jones is kind of running laps and celebrating with fans. And he came up to you and the crew and celebrated with you for like a moment. And to me, I thought that must have been really special to you because you all are part of this. Is that way up in your list of favorite memories?
That it is a favorite memory, but it's kind of tainted a little bit because, you know, they send out all this documentation saying the grounds crew is not allowed to go out and celebrate. Like, you know, they kind of like refrain us from doing anything. So that's why in those past moments, like you see us kind of like standing back on the wall And like Adam was one that was like, no, get out here. You're part of us. And like, and then I was like, oh my gosh, do we or don't we? Are we going to in trouble from MLB, like to go and celebrate or anything? And I get that that's their moment and like, you know, respect what they have to do every single day out there on that field. But that was probably one of the highlights. And also just seeing Cal Ripken, his retirement, that was pretty impressive because, you know, he's like the Babe Ruth of my time, you know,
Sure,
like,
right.
I mean, there's nobody else that's ever going to be like, well, in the way distant future, but, you know, seeing his retirement and that whole thing that we did for him was just pretty incredible.
Yeah. And let's wrap up for you and I before questions come. On
Yeah.
the more personal side, being a mom, how does that, like, obviously you spend a lot of time at the ballpark in your schedule. How do you make those two things work? 'Cause you have a more important job. That's the most important is the parenting, but also this job is terribly important.
Yeah, it's really about work-life balance, really managing a crew to be able to do everything that you do, because who knows what's going to happen. I could get sick, you know, and like COVID's shown a light on a lot of that, right? Like if you were, you know, tested positive with COVID, you were out for 10 days. Like, so having Tyson, my son, he's 10 now, but I had him a day before opening day, which is like great. Like, when I was, you know, expecting, I was like, you know, you guys are going to have to take over for me for 3 months. I'm going to be on like maternity leave, you know, tending to something greater than this. And, you know, just training everybody to do exactly what you do. So like nobody on that field is left behind. Like anybody can pick up at any moment and do everything that I do. I have staff that can read the radar, can understand how to talk to these umpires, talk to the coaches. So we're very, I don't know, like team atmosphere, like more so than anything. And then understanding that work-life balance is important. Like I'm not going to miss out on a lot of the moments that I need to be, you know, with my son. And also like, if I did have to be at work, he's going to come with me and he's going to see like, hey, number one, what mom does, but number two, like what kid wouldn't like to have a big major league playground as like, you know, their babysitter. So I try my best for sure.
Great. I think that's it for me. I believe now we're going to turn over questions to people who have joined us here. Is that correct?
Alrighty, yes, this is incredibly fascinating. I'm learning so much. So if you have a question for Nicole, if you want to put your camera on and unmute, and we'll just kind of go through them one by one.
Awesome. I'll talk about anything that happened on that field.
Thank you for being here tonight, and go Blue Hens,
Go Blue
class
Hens.
of 97. So my question to you, in our house, you know, it's a running joke that TV meteorologists only have to be accurate 50% of the time. It seems like the standard in your industry is much, much higher.
Yes.
How does one determine that you and your industry is successful? And is there somebody in Major League Baseball that everyone looks to as the person who always gets it right?
I think, you know, yeah, well, thank you for that. I feel like, you know, the imposter syndrome all the time, like trying to say like what's going to happen with the weather. And, you know, I'd like to be like those meteorologists on the TV and be like, right, only 50% of the time. I think we are so good at what we do. And we're so accurate on when that rain's going to fall and like conveying that stuff to the umpire crew chief, like I mentioned, that really makes an impact, because like, you know, think about all the revenue and everything that goes into getting that game played and the safety of those athletes. You have to be right. So if I know like this weekend, it's been raining, it will probably rain all weekend for the next 4 days. I've been watching weather reports. I've been reading forecast discussions. I've been watching the radar, just trying to really get advice from other meteorologists that are like, you know, real meteorologists, not me pretending to be one, about what may occur. There's a lot of science that goes into meteorology, number one, but then there's a lot of taking that science and dumbing it down and conveying it to, not that my industry is dumb or the people that I work with are dumb, but just dumbing it down to make more sense of like, are we going to get this game in or not? So it's been a lot of studying, so to speak, the last few days and any days leading up to any really significant rain events that occur.
Who ultimately makes that call?
So ultimately, I feed all the information, and then a senior leadership team makes that call. And then if we need to, MLB, Major League Baseball, is involved in that conversation. It really, I guess, I don't want to take too much time up, but prior to the All-Star break, the home team has the advantage of saying whether we're going to be able to delay a game, maybe can we get it in, or postpone a game and we play it at a different date. As soon as the All-Star break gets close, then Major League Baseball steps in, because now you're in playoff contention. Some of these teams aren't ever going to come back to the yard to play. So you got to figure out like off days. It could really throw off a lot of like scheduling, a lot of player rotation type stuff. So Major League Baseball is a part of that discussion as well. And then if we got into the playoffs, that's a whole nother ball game. It's feeding information and then sitting back and waiting for the higher ups to make that ultimate decision.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Sure. Hi, Nicole. Good to see you again. I don't know if you remember, we met a few years ago when you were awarded the Mary Pickerskill Award
Yes.
for your entrepreneurship. It was fabulous. The Maryland Women's Heritage Center is also part of the board for Star Spangled, so we always have the opportunity to recommend women who are doing cool stuff. And for those of us that are newly sports fans or newly baseball fans, since you, frankly, that was a great award. So I wanted to congratulate you again for that. But what I wanted to say was I wanted to also thank the Orioles, because the Orioles wanted to bring their softball team of girls to visit the Maryland Women's Heritage Center a couple months ago during Women's History Month or something. But do you interact with the softball team very much, so they can, again, you can role model with them or other activities, or that's just the thing is, I was a little the community outreach person was so nice, and so I sort of said a little bit offhandedly, well, do you think the bird could come that day too? Not knowing that the bird is like everywhere. And the bird came, and the young women were so excited. I also have to say that many people on this call who were there were very excited too to have their picture taken with a bird.
Yeah.
And then subsequently, we were given, as a part of the thank you for the tour we did, they invited us to a game. And so we were treated so well. And I hadn't been in years until I had students before. But I just wanted to talk a bit more about kind of the opportunities you have to talk about, your career pathway. And I know that the jobs are limited, but just to role model a little bit more. Do you have any time to do any of that, or how we can help with that?
Yeah, for sure. So like, I'm a big advocate. I love, excuse me, number one, I studied agriculture, so I'm fascinated with the way plants grow, and tying that in with sports is just kind of like amazing that I get to do this position, have this position and do this every single day. Love baseball, enjoy baseball, softball, whatever you want to say, and incorporate what I studied as a passion. So anytime I can get out in front of women or young girls and say, like, you do have a place in this sporting world, because it is all men. Like, and it's still like there are women that are in there sprinkled all over, but to be out on a field and to, help lead a crew, do the actual physical work as well as the scientific work behind this field, this beautiful field, I think speaks volumes to any little girl or woman in the stands, like watching, right? Because it could be a pivotal change for them. I try to talk to high schools at career days to try to influence people getting into more STEM related industries, and also more, just thinking outside the box type of thing. So I do my part to try to get out there and talk about what I do, how it was for me being one of only 2 women in this industry, and trying to educate the masses about, if you can see it, you can be it, and then try to be a strong representation for females trying to get into sports in general.
Thanks so much for all your work. Let us know how we can help.
Absolutely.
So you talked about the sod farm. So I briefly worked at like a golf course. So I don't know if any of this is real, but so when they need to fill in something, they have probably some part of the course that has the sod that they can use to fill in. Do you not have that luxury on the field, and do you have to bring that sod in from this farm if you need to fill something?
Right. So when we did the full field construction, it was over 100,000 square feet of new grass that was coming. That came from a turfgrass farm in New Jersey. We on site have about 4,000 square feet underneath that batter's eye, that if there was like a hole in the field or a player dove for the ball and really like skidded out some grass, we can go out and repair those areas using the sod that's on site. Otherwise, if it was massive construction or like damage from, let's say, the concert that happens, we have to get that trucked in from a sod farm. It's just too much to handle on site. But we do have a little bit of an area where we can fix stuff from this little sod farm.
The sod from that farm, does that like service other ballparks, or is that?
It does. Yeah, it's really crazy because like this is really the go-to farm on the East Coast for major league sports, and that's everything from football, lacrosse, soccer, professional baseball. It's a blueberry farm in New Jersey, and blueberries love sandy soils. So growing grass on that type of sand, we bring it to Camden Yards, and you're marrying it to 100% sand. So it has the most, I don't know what the word is, like the root zone is almost perfect to match up. We used to get it from East Coast, what is it? Like lower Delaware, probably Laurel area, but that had a lot of silt in it. So every time we brought it over, it would have a hard time draining. This sod from New Jersey that's grown on a old blueberry farm drains better. I'm trying to dumb it down a little bit to like make it make sense, but like it's almost 88% sand matching to 100% sand is a better drainage capabilities than any lower Delaware type turf farm that we used to get it from.
Awesome. That is so very, very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Any other questions here? Okay.
Kate does. Hi, Kate. You're on mute.
Unmute. I want to thank you so much.
Kathy, sorry. Yeah.
And I know it's Kate, actually.
Oh, Kate. Okay. Sorry.
I want to thank you so much. It's just been absolutely fascinating to hear all the details that go into, trying to make something that we just watch on television and don't even really think about.
Yeah.
And all the details you've shared has been wonderful. And the idea of being able to join together your passion for agriculture and baseball to create your own niche and be a leader in the field for women is excellent. And
thank you.
Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. I loved you mentioning Cal Ripken, because my son, who is a huge he's 36, he's a huge Cal Ripken fan. And when he was, 7 or 8 was when Cal was going through his big long streak or whatever. And I used to do television commercials, and I did a television commercial with Cal Ripken.
Oh, that's amazing.
He signed a ball, and I brought it home and a picture of us to prove that it's really legitimate. But to this day, even though we live in Silver Spring, Maryland, my son is still a rabid Orioles fan.
Yeah.
And has been going around. He's in Chicago now, was at the Chicago game, and now he's going to go up to the Minneapolis game. So, it's really fascinating, and it just really kind of touches my heart.
It is.
See the Orioles,
Yeah, doing so well, number one, and then the history behind the team too is just fascinating. I was, when I was an intern, this was 2001 when I first started, we did do drags on the field. So like my first time going out on the field, I stood next to Cal Ripken. And being from Northern Delaware, I grew up a Philadelphia Phillies fan. That's all we got on the TV. We didn't really get to witness any of the Oriole games besides the World Series in 1983, but I was like 7, So I didn't really understand, but I knew these were the greatest players. I had baseball cards growing up. I knew who Cal Ripken was. And for me to be this number one lover of baseball And number 2, getting to work on a major league field. And then number 3, standing next to Cal Ripken, who like just looked like just massive person, was quite like an experience for just being a kid trying to like make it in this industry. So he has a special place in my heart for sure. And witnessing his last year as an Oriole, I am sad that I didn't get to experience, like all of you Oriole fans, growing up an Oriole fan, I didn't get to really understand that because I was so young at the time, but it was cool.
I just want to thank you again, because it's been fascinating and very educational for.
Thank you. Awesome.
That will wrap up our program tonight. Nicole, thank you so much for being here. Roch, thank you so much for emceeing this event. It's been absolutely fascinating. Thanks to the Maryland Women's Heritage Center for co-hosting with us. And thank you, Fran Soisman, for sponsoring this event. And our next virtual program will feature John Miller on September 7th. And you can get tickets for that at brmspeakers.givesmart.com. And again, Nicole, Roch, Maryland Women's Heritage, thank you all so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night. Go Owls.